Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who dominated European affairs for over a decade, met his end not in battle, but in exile. Following his defeat at Waterloo in 1815, he was banished to the desolate island of St. Helena in the Atlantic. He died there on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51. The official cause of death was stomach cancer, but theories of arsenic poisoning have persisted for centuries, supported by later analysis of his hair samples. He was initially buried on the island in a place called the Valley of the Willows, his grave marked by a simple stone slab. The slab was left nameless because his British captors refused the inscription Napoleon, and his French entourage refused Napoleon Bonaparte in his will. Napoleon had requested to be buried on the banks of the Seine in 1840. This wish was posthumously granted. His body was exhumed and returned to France in a national event known as the Retour des Cendres, or Return of the Ashes. A grand funeral procession brought his remains to Paris, where he was laid to rest. Today, his tomb is a monumental sarcophagus of red quartzite, resting on a green granite base, located directly under the dome of Les Invalides. It is a resting place of imperial scale for a man whose ambition and genius reshaped the world. Alexander the Great conquered the known world before his 33rd birthday, but his reign ended abruptly and mysteriously in Babylon. In late May of 323 BC, after a prolonged bout of heavy drinking, he was struck by a severe fever and pain that lasted for nearly 2 weeks. He eventually lost the ability to speak and died on the 10th or 11th of June. The cause of his death remains a subject of intense debate among historians. Theories range from natural causes like malaria or typhoid fever to assassination by poison, a suspicion held even by some in the ancient world. Without his body to examine, the truth is likely lost forever. His death created a power vacuum, and his most powerful generals immediately began to fight over his empire. His body became a potent symbol of power and legitimacy. The funeral cortege was hijacked on its way to Macedonia by his general Ptolemy I Soter, who took the body to Egypt. Alexander was first buried in Memphis, then later moved to a magnificent tomb in the city he founded, Alexandria. For centuries, this tomb was a famous site, visited by Roman emperors. However, its location was lost to history sometime during the late Roman period. Despite countless searches and theories, the final resting place of one of history's greatest conquerors remains one of its most enduring mysteries. Cyrus the Great founded the First Persian Empire and is remembered for his vast conquests and his remarkably enlightened policies on human rights. The circumstances of his death in 530 BC are contested. The Greek historian Herodotus tells a dramatic tale of Cyrus being killed in battle against the Massagetae, a nomadic tribe whose queen, Tamiris, sought revenge for the death of her son. Other ancient sources suggest he died peacefully in his capital city. Whatever the cause, his legacy as a just and powerful ruler was already secure. His final resting place, unlike his death, is well documented. The tomb of Cyrus is located at the archaeological site of Pasargadae in modern-day Iran. It is an understated yet powerful structure, consisting of a gabled chamber on a 6-tiered stone pedestal. Its humble design stands in stark contrast to the massive empire Cyrus ruled. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia nearly 2 centuries later, he visited the tomb and was angered to find it had been desecrated. He ordered it repaired and sealed, a testament to the deep respect he held for his predecessor. The tomb's simple elegance and robust construction have allowed it to survive earthquakes and invasions for over 2.5 millennia. A quiet monument to the founder of the Persian Empire, Khalid ibn al-Walid, was one of the most formidable military commanders in history, earning the title the Drawn Sword of God for his undefeated record in over 100 battles. He was a key figure in the early Islamic conquests, shattering the Byzantine and Persian armies with his tactical brilliance and innovative use of cavalry. His mere presence on a battlefield was often enough to secure victory, as his reputation for invincibility was widespread. Despite spending his entire life in the heart of the fiercest combat, Khalid did not receive the martyr's death he craved. He was dismissed from military command due to political shifts and spent his last years quietly in Homs, Syria. He died in his bed in the year 642. On his deathbed, he is said to have sorrowfully shown visitors the countless scars that covered his body, lamenting that despite seeking martyrdom everywhere, he was dying peacefully like an old camel. He was buried in Homs, and eventually, the Khalid ibn al-Walid Mosque was constructed around his tomb. For centuries, the mosque has served as a major landmark and a site of reverence, housing the remains of the warrior who paradoxically survived every battle only to die in his bed. Hannibal Barca of Carthage was Rome's most feared adversary. His audacious crossing of the Alps and his subsequent string of victories on Italian soil, most notably at the Battle of Cannae, brought the Roman Republic to the brink of collapse. For over a decade, he terrorized Italy, but he was never able to deliver the final blow. He was eventually defeated on his home ground in North Africa by Scipio Africanus, bringing the Second Punic War to a close. After the war, the Romans pursued him relentlessly. Hannibal lived the rest of his life in exile, moving between the courts of Eastern kings, always a man on the run. Around 183 BC, with Roman agents closing in on him in Bithynia, In modern-day Turkey, the aging general decided his own fate, rather than suffer the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a captive. He committed suicide by taking poison, which he reportedly carried in a ring. He was around 64 years old. His precise burial location is not known with certainty, but ancient writers claimed he was buried near Labisa, now the town of Gebze, in Turkey. A modern memorial mound stands in the area today as a symbolic grave, marking the approximate final resting place of the general who almost destroyed Rome. Julius Caesar was the Roman general and a statesman whose actions led to the end of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. After declaring himself dictator in perpetuity, his consolidation of power angered many in the Roman Senate who feared he was becoming a king. Their fears led to one of history's most infamous assassinations. On the Ides of March 15th of 44 BC, a group of senators stabbed him to death at a meeting held at the theater of Pompey. His death did not restore the Republic but instead plunged it into another series of bloody civil wars. The events following his death were just as dramatic. During his public funeral, a grieving and enraged Roman mob seized his body after a fiery oration by Mark Antony. They built an impromptu funeral pyre in the center of the Roman Forum and cremated him on the spot. Later, his heir and adopted son Augustus built the temple of the deified Julius Caesar on the site of his cremation. This act solidified Caesar's godlike status. Today, the ruins of this temple still stand in the Forum. A small, simple altar, often adorned with fresh flowers left by visitors, marks the exact location where the body of the legendary conqueror was returned to. Genghis Khan forged the largest contiguous land empire in world history, uniting the Mongol tribes and leading them on a series of conquests across Asia and Europe. He was a brilliant military strategist and a ruthless conqueror, but also an effective administrator who established a written language, a legal code, and trade routes that connected the East and West. The end of his life is shrouded in the same secrecy that characterized many of his affairs. He died in August of 1227 during a campaign against the Tangut people. The exact cause of his death remains unknown. Theories include falling from his horse, illness like typhus, or wounds sustained in battle. Genghis Khan had given strict orders for a secret burial. According to legend, his funeral procession killed any person or animal that crossed its path to protect the location's secrecy. The slaves who built his tomb were killed, as were the soldiers who killed them. After the grave was filled, a river was said to have been diverted to flow over the site, and 1,000 horses trampled the earth to erase any trace. To this day, the tomb of Genghis Khan has never been found. It is believed to be hidden somewhere in the Khenti Mountains of his native Mongolia, remaining the most sought-after lost grave in history. Scipio Africanus was the Roman general celebrated for achieving what no other commander could: the defeat of Hannibal. His strategic genius lay in his decision to invade Carthage's homeland in North Africa, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy and defend his own city. This led to the decisive Battle of Zama in 202 BC, where Scipio's victory ended the Second Punic War and made him Rome's greatest hero. Despite his revered status, Scipio's later years were filled with political turmoil. Jealous rivals, led by Cato the Elder, accused him of corruption and treason. Disgusted by what he saw as the ingratitude of the Roman Senate, Scipio left Rome and entered a self-imposed exile at his coastal estate in Lit. He died there in 183 BC, the same year as his great nemesis, Hannibal. He was said to be so bitter that he left instructions that he should not be buried in his ungrateful country. True to his wishes, he was not buried in the family tomb in Rome. However, the exact location of his grave at Litynum has never been confirmed. The final resting place of the man who saved Rome from its greatest threat remains a historical mystery. Frederick II, known as Frederick the Great, was a Prussian king who combined the persona of an enlightened philosopher with that of a brilliant and ruthless military commander. Through his leadership in conflicts like the 7 Years' War, he elevated Prussia from a secondary state to a major European power. Relying on the discipline and efficiency of the army he had meticulously reformed in his personal life. Frederick adored his summer palace Sanssouci and his Italian greyhounds. He made a very specific wish for his death. He wanted to be buried on the vineyard terrace of the palace, next to his beloved dogs, in a simple grave with no ceremony. When he died on August 17, 1786, his nephew and heir ignored this request. Instead, Frederick was interred with full state honors next to his father, whom he had disliked, in the garrison church in Pots. His coffin was moved several times during and after World War II to protect it. It was not until the reunification of Germany that his last wish was finally honored. On the 205th anniversary of his death in 1991, his remains were brought to Sanssouci and laid to rest in the simple crypt he had prepared for himself. Finally rejoining his faithful dogs, Ulysses S. Grant commanded the Union armies to victory in the American Civil War and later served as the 18th U.S. president. As a general, his tenacity and strategic mind were instrumental in turning the tide of the war, culminating in the surrender of his rival, Robert E. Lee, at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865. Years after his presidency, Grant was left bankrupt by a fraudulent business partner and simultaneously diagnosed with terminal throat cancer. In a final heroic effort to provide for his family, he began writing his personal memoirs. He worked relentlessly through immense pain, completing the manuscript just days before his death on July 23rd. The memoirs became a monumental success, securing his family's financial future. His death inspired a massive wave of public mourning and a desire to create a fitting monument. A public fund raised over $600,000 for his tomb. The result is the General Grant National Memorial in New York City, the largest mausoleum in North America. Inside, he and his wife Julia rest side by side in twin sarcophagi of red granite, a grand final tribute to the man who preserved the Union. Robert E. Lee was the commanding general of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, widely regarded as one of the most brilliant military tacticians in American history. He led his often outnumbered army to numerous victories. When Virginia seceded from the Union, Lee chose to defend his home state over a command in the U.S. Army. He surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in April of 1865, effectively ending the Civil War. After the war, Lee became a prominent advocate for reconciliation. He accepted the presidency of Washington College in Lexington, Virginia, encouraging former Confederates to rebuild and become peaceful citizens of a reunited nation. He spent his last 5 years working to build the college into a first-rate institution. In September of 1870, he suffered a stroke and died 2 weeks later on October 12. He was buried in a crypt beneath the Lee Chapel on the campus of the college he had led. The school was later renamed Washington and Lee University in his honor. A memorial sculpture by Edward Valentine, depicting a sleeping Lee on the battlefield, rests above his tomb, where he is interred with his wife and other family members. William Tecumseh Sherman was a principal architect of the Union's victory in the American Civil War, a close subordinate of Ulysses S. Grant. Sherman was a brilliant strategist known for his hard war philosophy. His famous 1864 march to the sea cut a path of destruction through Georgia, crippling the Confederacy's infrastructure and morale and helping to hasten the end of the conflict. He later succeeded Grant as commanding general of the U.S. Army. Sherman retired in 1884 and lived in New York City. He died there of pneumonia on February 14, 1891. After a large funeral procession in New York, his body was transported by train to St. Louis for burial. At the St. Louis service, his former wartime adversary, Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston, served as a pallbearer. As a sign of respect, the elderly Johnston stood bareheaded in the cold rain. He caught a severe cold, which developed into pneumonia, and he died several weeks later. This final act of chivalry between former foes became a legendary story of post-war reconciliation. Sherman was buried in Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis next to his wife and his son, Willie, who had died during the war. Dwight D. Eisenhower was a five-star general and the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe during World War II. He was the chief architect of the D-Day invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious assault in history, which led to the liberation of France and the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. After the war, he became the 34th President of the United States. After 2 terms as president, Eisenhower retired to his farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He suffered from poor health in his later years and died from congestive heart failure on March 28, 1969 at Walter Reed Army Hospital. Following a state funeral in Washington, D.C., his body was taken by train to his boyhood hometown of Abilene, Kansas. There, he was buried in a small, unadorned chapel he helped design on the grounds of the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. He called it the place of meditation. His grave, and that of his wife Mamie beside him, is marked by a simple bronze slab, reflecting the humble, small-town roots of the man who commanded the mightiest armies in the world and led the free world. General George S. Patton Jr. was one of America's most effective and controversial commanders of World War II, an expert in armored warfare. His aggressive leadership of the Third Army was legendary, particularly its rapid advance across France and its crucial role in relieving besieged American forces during the Battle of the Bulge, known as Old Blood and Guts. He was both revered by his troops and reprimanded by his superiors for his brash conduct. Patton survived the war's fiercest fighting, but he did not die on the battlefield. On December 9, 1945, while stationed in post-war Germany, he was in a low-speed car accident. While others had minor injuries, Patton suffered a catastrophic spinal cord injury that left him paralyzed from the neck down. He was hospitalized in Heidelberg and died from a pulmonary embolism 12 days later. On December 20, before his death, Patton had told his wife that he wished to be buried with his men. His request was honored. Instead of being returned to the United States, General Patton was buried in the Luxembourg American Cemetery and Memorial, laid to rest among the thousands of soldiers from his Third Army who had fallen in combat. A simple white cross marks his grave. Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke, known as the Elder, was the chief of the Prussian General Staff for 30 years. He was the strategic architect behind the series of decisive wars against Denmark, Austria, and finally France that led to the unification of Germany in 1871. He modernized the military by pioneering new uses of railways and telegraphs and developed a system of command that emphasized decentralized execution, allowing commanders greater flexibility. His military philosophy and operational planning shaped armies across the world for decades. Unlike many on this list, Moltke's end was peaceful. After a long and distinguished career, he died at his home in Berlin at the age of 90 on April 24, 1891. He was given a state funeral and was interred in a family mausoleum on his estate in Kreisau. However, his final resting place did not remain undisturbed. After World War II, the region of Silesia became part of Poland. During the turbulent post-war period, the Moltke family estate was plundered, and the mausoleum containing his remains was desecrated and destroyed. Today, nothing is left of the tomb of the man who masterminded the creation of the German Empire. Marshal of the Soviet Union, Georgy Zhukov, was the most acclaimed Soviet general of World War II. He was the man Stalin relied on to save the Soviet Union from its gravest threats. He organized the desperate defense of Moscow, planned the pivotal victory at Stalingrad, and led the final brutal assault on Berlin in 19. It was Zhukov who formally accepted Germany's surrender. His strategic acumen and utter ruthlessness were central to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front. Despite his status as a national hero, Zhukov's immense popularity made both Stalin and his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, see him as a political threat. He was twice demoted and eventually forced into retirement, spending his final years writing his memoirs under the watchful eye of state censors. Zhukov died of a stroke on June 18, 1974. Although he had been politically sidelined, his wartime legacy was too immense to be ignored. He was given a state funeral with full military honors. His body was cremated and his ashes were interred in the Kremlin Wall necropolis in Moscow's Red Square, the final resting place for the Soviet Union's most celebrated figures. It was a place of high honor for the general who had saved the nation. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was Germany's most famous general of the Second World War. He earned his legendary reputation leading the Afrika Korps, where his masterful command of tank warfare in North Africa won him the respect of his adversaries. He was later tasked with defending France from the anticipated Allied invasion. Rommel's career ended tragically. As the war turned against Germany, he grew disillusioned with Hitler's leadership. He was linked to the conspirators of the 20th of July plot to assassinate Hitler in 1944. On October 14th of that year, two generals sent by Hitler confronted Rommel at his home. They gave him an ultimatum: commit suicide quietly and receive a state funeral, ensuring his family's safety, or face a public trial for treason that would lead to his execution and his family's ruin. To protect his wife and son, Rommel chose suicide. He was driven to a secluded spot and ingested a cyanide capsule. The Nazi regime falsely announced that their popular field marshal had died from wounds sustained earlier in an air attack. He was given a state funeral as promised, and is buried in a simple civilian grave in the churchyard cemetery of Germany. Thomas Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate general and one of the most brilliant tactical commanders in American military history. As Robert E. Lee's most reliable corps commander, his tactical genius was on full display during his Shenandoah Valley campaign and at battles like Second Bull Run and Antietam. He was known for his unyielding battlefield presence, which earned him his nickname, and his ability to move his foot cavalry with incredible speed. Jackson's career was cut short at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May of 1863, at the zenith of his military success. While scouting his lines after dark, he and his staff were mistaken for Union cavalry by Confederate pickets and were fired upon. Jackson was struck 3 times, and his left arm had to be amputated. While initially recovering, he developed pneumonia and died 8 days later, on May 10th. His last words were, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." His death was a severe blow to the Confederate war effort, with General Lee mourning that he had lost his right arm. Jackson's body was transported to Lexington, Virginia, where he had been a professor before the war. He was buried in the city's cemetery, now known as the Stonewall Jackson Memorial Cemetery.